Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Bret Primack, and thanks for joining me today. Actually, us. I have a special guest who will be joining us shortly, Mr. Richard Dubin. Uh, I'm celebrating my 74th birthday today. I thought, why not do it online? Reach out there to my friends in Facebook land and on YouTube. I'm going to talk about my life a bit, where it's been, where it's going, and my guest, Richard Dubin, who's a professional trumpet player by the age of 10, who's Clark Terry's protege, went on to play in some amazing situations, and then became an actor, a teacher, and a successful screenwriter, script doctor, actually, uh, sitcom writer, producer, director, fascinating career. We'll talk with Dubin about his life, some of our shared experiences. We've had some very interesting experiences, to say the least. Some of which I can tell, some of which I can't. But I am going to tell several R-rated stories today. They actually are X-rated, but I'm going to clean them up just a bit. So you might want to, the evangelical Christians and children might want to leave the room for the show. But we're going to start out here with a video. Dubin and I met when we were cab drivers, and we shared certainly a huge mutual interest in jazz. He was a former trumpet player, and I was a former trumpet player as well. So let's start off with Richard Dubin's mentor, one of his many mentors, Clark Terry.
Well, we'd like now to play a Billy Strayhorn original, Take the A Train, which is the Ellington theme song. Horace Parlin, our pianist, and bassist Eddie Jones, drummer Eddie Tate, will start the ball rolling with the first chorus of Take the A Train. Ernie Wilkins' arrangement.
Yeah.
Thank you very kindly. Grady Tate on drums, Eddie Jones bass, Horace Parlin piano, Jimmy Heath saxophone, and Chris Woods on flute.
Thank you, Clark Terry, and hello, Richard Dubin.
Hello, Bret Primack. Happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much, brother. 74, a little difficult to believe, but I'm here. That's a pretty good thing.
Well, I happen to say you are here, and not without some challenges overcome in recent history. So I'm proud that you can withstand some surgery.
Well,
Because I've often considered that I'd like to do some surgery on you. So now I know it's possible.
okay. Well, we'll discuss that later on. I don't know what your fees are or whether Medicare will cover it. But Clark Terry, before we talk before we talk about Clark Terry, I have to say that I've known Richard Dubin since 1970. We've been cab drivers, friends, worked on projects together. But actually, Dubin was, in a way, responsible for my career as a jazz writer and as a jazz video guy, because when we were buddies in the early 70s and we're talking about jazz, and he was telling me about he knew a number of people, including Clark Terry, took me to see Clark Terry. Clark Terry was really the first jazz musician that I considered a friend. I got to know him because of Dubin. We went to a lot of gigs. Through Clark Terry, I met Walter Bishop Jr. I did an interview with Bish. I sent it into Downbeat, and that began my career as a jazz writer. And all the things that have happened since then in the world of jazz kind of came from that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet. I appreciate it.
Okay, so 10-year-old professional trumpet player by the age of 10. That's pretty amazing. How did you get hooked up with Clark, and what was it like to have him as a mentor?
Well, I got hooked up with Clark through Paulie Cohen. Paulie Cohen's a lead trumpet player, little remembered now, recently dead. But he played with everybody, including he played lead in Clark's band for a while, as I'm sure you recall. I remember going to see him with you, going to see Clark and the big band when Paul was playing lead. And Paulie introduced me to Terry, basically saying, you see what an embouchure looks like. Let's look at Clark Terry, and I met Clark, and we became fast friends. And then he came off the road, and once he was in New York, I saw him all the time. And he was great. Encouraged me, taught me a ton, not only about playing the trumpet, but about how to live life on this planet. For those who don't know Clark was a sweet, genuine, delicious human being. What you see is what you get with Clark Terry. So I learned a lot about how to live from Clark.
Now, you were around jazz musicians from a very young age. You had an early interest in music. Tell us the story about how, I don't know how old you were, 8, 9, 10 years old. You lived in the Bronx. You took the subway down to Midtown. You know where there were studios there, and who helped you out and what that led to?
Well, I met George Duvier. George Duvier was my entree to the studio scene. I used to hang out in front of the Metropole and dance around out there, where I met. For those who don't know, it was an open air kind of place where bands played along the back bar. There was a stage behind the bar, and it was all open to the street. And Henry Red Allen was regular there, and Henry Red Allen dug me, and it was a continuous gig, which means there was constant playing, but the personnel would change, and when people weren't on at the Metropole, they'd go across the street to the Brass Rail. Brass Rail was a kind of soul food joint bar. You know those Irish bars with steam tables? And well, it was a soul food bar with steam tables. right across the street from the Metropole, which was between 48th and 49th Street on, I still can't get this right. What's 7th Avenue and what's Broadway? 7th Avenue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 7th Avenue. And I just sit there and listen to cats tell stories, man. I mean, it was like Charlie Shavers and Henry Red Allen and Shorty Baker and Cozy Cole and, just an array of legendary musicians. And I just sit and listen to stories, and I was in. Anyhow, some musicians walked by the Metropole one day while I was standing outside, and I decided to follow them. And we wound up, I followed them into Capitol, which was either on 44th Street or 46th Street. I can't remember because I'm old, but I couldn't remember even when I was young. And I followed them in and then pressed my ear against the studio door, not knowing that it was 8 feet thick, and couldn't hear anything. But I was pressed against it, and the door opened, and I was thrown to the floor, and out walked George Duvivier with a bass, and saw me on the floor and questioned me in Perry Mason fashion about who I was and what the fuck I was doing on the floor. And I explained what I was doing, that is, wanted to hear music. And this is how different the world is. He drove me in his Cadillac back to the Bronx, took me home, and asked my parents if it was okay if he took me to studios to hear music. And they, of course, said yes. And this is a little odd because this is 1954, and he's a black man driving a Cadillac, and they had no problems with that whatsoever. I'm really, really lucky to have had parents who were supportive, and George Duvivier, who showed me a lot of love, and I had access to all the finest musicians in New York City from the time I was 9 years old. I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours sitting in studios, meeting everybody, knowing everybody. And so by the time I joined the Musicians Union when I was 13, I was hooked up. And by the time I was 16, I was a really competent trumpet player and really hooked up. So I was off and running from the get-go.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about one of your, I think, most important gigs, which is actually a piece of American history that sadly not many people know about it. I'm going to call up a video introduction here, and then we'll talk about it. Here we go.
Okay.
In 1963, Richard Dubin participated in a historic event, a salute to freedom in Birmingham, Alabama, to raise money for Dr. Martin Luther King's efforts to integrate Alabama and also to help support the upcoming March on Washington. A few months later, where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech, Richard Dubin played in the trumpet section in Birmingham, a show that included appearances by Dr. King, Ray Charles, Johnny Mathis, Nina Simone, and James Baldwin. The event itself met with considerable resistance from local Birmingham officials, including its racist chief of police, Bull Connor. The show was smuggled into Alabama to urge blacks and whites to integrate in the community and at performances. The police and mayor refused protection. This was really the first integrated audience and performance in the history of the city of Birmingham. Taxi drivers refused to pick people up. Restaurants refused service. The city theater and auditorium refused to stage the presentation. So Dr. King and Joey Adams, who helped organize the benefit, built a stage at Mills College, threatening calls and letters, promises of bombings, riots, and physical injury, all failed to deter the group or the show, which went on at 9 p.m. and lasted for 5 hours. Halfway through the presentation, the stage collapsed.
Yeah. Left me speechless there for a minute. How did you get the gig, and what after this introduction about the difficulties of the integration of blacks and whites at that time. What were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome on this gig?
Well, I didn't notice any because I was just, I was kind of free and easy. I didn't. I mean, I knew what was happening, but I didn't mind it much. Fortunately, I did have a bag of weed that I intended to take with me, and I rode to the airport with Willie Dennis, who's on the gig, great trombone player for those who are unfamiliar with his playing, and he was married to Morgana King at the time. And Morgana said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" So she confiscated, much to my I fought. I didn't want to give up the weed, but she confiscated it, and so that was where I was at. It was in a way I knew it was this very special event. In another way, it was another day at the office, and I kind of got high at the office regularly. And so that was my attitude toward it. I was not at all, as I said, it was another gig. What was the B part of that question? There was another part. Oh, how did I get it?
It wasn't an easy situation. I mean, you had to be bussed in and out. Talk about the logistics and why they were challenging.
Well, there were no. We weren't bussed in. There were no buses. I know that's the way it's portrayed, but there were no buses. Community people picked us up in their private cars, and we went to Gaston's, which was the black motel in town. You know, in these kinds of towns, there was always a rich black guy. In this case, it was Gaston. He had two initials. I can't remember. His place has recently reopened, the motel. There would be some black person in town who owned the lodging facility, the insurance company, the mortuary, the full service rich black guy, and that was Gaston there. So we were taken to Gaston's. All the scene that you showed, the street kind of, the dogs and Bull Connor and everything, they were there. I saw them. That was interesting. It was exciting. Excitement in those days basically got me horny. That's hey, this is exciting. I think I'm horny. So I was pretty confused about all of how to. My reactions were primitive, so I didn't have any kind of notable reaction other than I was 18 years old and I just wanted to play the trumpet and have fun.
Yeah, well, certainly any story that has Martin Luther King and horniness in it will be
right.
Sure.
I did wind up having lunch with him. I sat at a table with him for lunch at Gaston's. Him, Harry Golden, Ralph Abernathy are the people I can remember at the table. But it was a table of like 8 people, and I, in my typical way, just sat down there. I really didn't know very much about Martin Luther King. As I said, I was busy having fun playing the trumpet, getting high, and like that.
Yeah. Well, as we get into the 60s and the 70s, Richard Dubin added acting to his creative arsenal. And when I first met Dubin, we were both cab drivers. I was at NYU Film School. And Dubin, I met Dubin at a cab driver's luncheon at Steve's on 2nd Avenue and 24th Street. Our mutual interest in cannabis and jazz kind of brought us together. And I was working on a film about my life as a cab driver. At the time, I was going to NYU during the day and driving a cab at night. And I made a film called Rough Ride. And here is Dubin as a passenger in the cab.
I think it's important.
How do you like driving a cab?
Jesus, I think it's a wonderful job.
What'd you say?
What? Said, how do you like driving a cab?
I said, cab driving is a wonderful job.
Wonderful job. Do you think it's a wonderful job? Do you really think it's a wonderful job?
I don't think you think it's a wonderful job. And you're putting us on.
Speak up,
speak up. Job, huh?
Man, I said it, didn't I? It's a wonderful job.
Yeah, but I think
driving.
you're full of shit. You don't really think it's a wonderful job. Let me ask you a question.
Jeez.
You get any peace of mind from doing this job? Peace of mind?
You know what that means? Peace of mind?
What's it mean?
Peace of mind. Peace of mind is the most important thing in the whole world.
You don't have that, you're nothing. You can...
What can I tell you? If you don't know what peace of mind is, that's why you're so full of shit when somebody asks you questions, because your mind's not peaceful. Your mind, if your mind
It's just
was
go around
peaceful,
in big circles and
you
win.
wouldn't, you'd act like a human
Listen,
being,
man.
answer a question, yeah?
You're making it difficult for my mind to be peaceful.
How could that be? You know what we do? You know what we do? We work together.
Yeah.
He and I,
We work together.
we work together. We work together. We dig tunnels.
What?
Tunnels!
Yeah, tunnels.
We dig tunnels.
You dig
It's the most
tunnels?
important thing in the whole world. Tunnels.
You dig them.
That gives us peace of mind.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, Jesus. Yeah, what does Jesus have to do with tunnels? Are you crazy? Tunnels.
You sound like you're crazy to me.
I think this job got to your head.
Yeah.
This job definitely got to your fucking head. There's no doubt about it. Bye-bye. You're out of your fucking mind. Yeah? This job got to your head. You've been trying to do fucking
Wow. 53 years ago.
Important to point out that you made this film in Marty Scorsese's class at NYU prior to Taxi Driver.
That's right. Martin Scorsese was one of my teachers in NYU Film School. I, like Mr. Dubin, has some very interesting people of note have crossed our paths. We'll talk about that in a moment. But at NYU Film School in the late 60s and early 70s, Marty was one of my teachers. Marty was the best teacher. Marty loved filmmaking. He lived filmmaking. It was the most important thing to him, and he wanted to share it. And hanging out with him and being in his classes only furthered my love affair with filmmaking, which started when I was a teenager. I remember showing him that clip, and he laughed, and I can't remember exactly what he might have said to me, but he was very encouraging about it. And then 3 years later, he made Taxi Driver. So I don't know if I inspired that. But I wanted to ask you, Richard, what was the inspiration for you to start acting?
I was doing a lot of work in pits, Broadway work. Paulie Cohen was known as Broadway Paulie Cohen. He recommended me to lots of people. I was a regular sub in Broadway shows. And at the same time, there were some very popular kinds of singers, entertainers who were former trumpet players. I'm thinking of Paul Anka in particular. And Frankie Avalon. And I said, well, what am I doing sitting down here under the thing? I should be up there. And not that I was having trouble exactly meeting women. I wasn't at all. But I thought, well, this will be, I need more light. It's dark down here. And so it was basically lust.
Yes, that's a very strong motivation in many cases.
Yes, that was it. And then it made all the difference in the world. Putting together music in the theater has really been formative in my life.
Yeah. Now I would say you've done a lot of acting. You've done some interesting acting. I saw you in 1977 at a theater in Atlanta, Barefoot in the Park.
Right.
Myrna
With
Loy.
Myrna Loy and Jean-Pierre Aumont.
Myrna Loy and Jean-Pierre Aumont. And the first day we arrived there, I accompanied Dubin down there for the beginning of this journey. Van Johnson was in the previous show, and we hung out with Van Johnson and Myrna Loy.
And Van Johnson wore Red Sox.
Van Johnson wore Red Sox, and he had some heavy scars on one side of his head from an automobile accident that, because of the way he was lit and framed, we never saw that. We never knew that as.
Yeah, we never saw Myrna Loy's legs, which were quite heavy. Also, they were. She was delicious. I mean, Myrna Loy was fabulous. I cannot sing her praises.
She must have been in her mid-80s by that point.
No, it just feels that way to us now, but she was like 70. We can look it up. it's readily available information on the internet when she was
Okay.
born. And that was, it's easy to do. You still do arithmetic, right?
Hold on one second.
And-
Chat GPT, look up Myrna Loy. Okay, we'll have the answer in 30 seconds.
Okay, great. And I remember the moment with Van Johnson. We knocked on the door because Myrna was going to move into the Van Johnson space because he was the star of his show, she was the star of her show, Barefoot. And there were balconies there, and the balconies were screened in, and they looked kind of like the screened-in balconies looked like something seen in a mental hospital, and Van Johnson said, "This is Judy Garland's old room," making a mental hospital kind of joke. That's what I remember from me is Red Sox and the Judy Garland bit.
Yeah, but what direction which you moved in was teaching, acting, directing. Teaching actors, which you've done extensively, directing, writing. You ended up in LA. You worked on some wonderful shows like Frank's Place. You were a writer, director, producer out there for a while. I wanted to ask you, and you worked a lot with black actors, black-based shows. You received some recognition for some of the shows you did because of that. How did your early days as a musician with Clark Terry and being part of, at a very special time, that unique community of black artists who were in New York or on the studio scene and playing jazz at that time, how did that impact your later work?
Greatly. I mean, I am bicultural, biracial, in the most important ways possible. I mean, these men raised me almost as much as my biological mother and father, who are not particularly black, but I am of that community, and made all the difference in the world. Because if I'm working with black people, they know they're working, as we would say, it's us. I am not outside that community. I am squarely in the middle of it, and it made all the difference in working on those shows.
Well, you did some great work out there. Unfortunately, we can't show any of that right now, but you mentioned earlier another mentor of yours who was Paulie Cohen. And through Richard Dubin, I met Paulie Cohen in the mid-'70s. And around, I guess it was 2012, 2013, Paulie Cohen had retired to Fort Lauderdale, was leading a big band down there. And Dubin said, why don't you come down to hang out? And I said, why don't I bring my camera? Why don't I shoot some stuff? And eventually that led to a documentary film that I did with Paulie Cohen. And I'm going to show a little excerpt from that right now.
We met, I talked to you like the same. Never thought you were a kid.
I would come for lessons on Wednesdays between shows in the pit of the Broadhurst Theater. We would sit in the trumpet section. He could really play the trumpet. He was really about no kidding around. And he clearly had an interest in my learning to play this instrument and taught me things that I really needed to know.
But do you remember bringing home hookers from the dog track?
Bringing home cookies from where?
The dog track.
You brought cookies home for the dog track?
You don't remember this?
No, man. All I thought about, I had the blinkers on. What is the best dog to play? Did he do that?
We once drove by a highlight place.
Yeah.
And I said, Paulie, why don't we go in this highlight place? And why aren't we betting on this?
Right.
He says, I don't bet on people.
Yeah.
Paulie Cohen, ladies and gentlemen.
So interesting that you got hooked up with Paulie Cohen. He taught you so much about the trumpet. But for a young guy like you, early teens, it must have been crazy to be with a guy like Paulie, who was a total wild man.
It was completely insane. Yeah, it was. but much more importantly, beyond the absolute terror and fun of it, he was a brutal teacher. Brutal, cursing, yelling, the exact opposite of Clark Terry, who was nothing but encouraging, and he encouraged in a very sick way, screaming and telling me that I was a piece of shit and couldn't play the trumpet, never would. At the same time, helping me get gigs. It was a little bit crazy making, but I loved him. I loved him till the end. He was great. But most importantly, what he taught me was what made it possible for me to make a living as a trumpet player. He taught me to read, really, I mean, not read, really read. Paulie Cohen was known as a guy who could read around the corner. So he taught me to do something a lot like that. I could read. And he also taught me to play lead. He taught me what the attitude necessary to play lead, taught me about the attitude necessary to play lead, which was take charge, which I think is what you called the film, Taking Charge, isn't it?
Yes.
And Taking Charge. That's the name of the game. And that has influenced me in every conceivable way. When I blended the Clark Terry way of living with the Paulie Cohen Taking Charge, it accounts for the way I lived the rest of my life, which led to success in the entertainment business, which I really didn't belong in. There I was, and I knew from Paulie, well, you better take charge.
Yeah. Now, a couple of stories I want you to repeat here that I love.
Yeah.
When you got to LA and in big time show business, television, celebrities, you encountered some interesting people. When you were producing, you once encountered the late Raquel Welch. Could you tell us your Raquel Welch story, please?
Yeah. There came a time in my LA days when I was in major demand, an A-list TV writer, producer, director, 7-figure deals. All the networks wanted to be in business with me, meaning everybody wanted to make a pilot with me, and it was a pretty heady time. And agents would send clients who they thought would be suitable stars of sitcoms. Often they weren't, but nevertheless were stars at some point. And Raquel Welch came to my office, and we sat and chatted. She was lovely. At this point, she was around 50, I think, and hardly over the hill. Hardly. I mean, this idea of a 50-year-old woman being over the hill is insane, and certainly not her. She was fabulous, and we were talking, and the subject came up in a very straightforward way of her age and what the struggles were with work at her age. And she said, "But I'm in great shape." I said, "Obviously, I have eyes. I see you. You're in great shape." She says, "You should feel my ass. It's hard as a rock. Would you like to feel my ass?" I said, "Well, it's not something I usually do here, but yeah, sure." So she got up off a couch, walked over to my desk, put her ass in my hand, and I squeezed it. And you know what? Hard as a rock.
Well, was that the only thing in the room at the time that was hard as a rock?
Yeah. I was in the habit of not harassing people, and when the Me Too thing happened, I took a break in my head and said, "Let me reflect on my life. Is there anything even remotely Me Too-ish that I should be looking forward to coming up here?" And the only thing I could think of that was even tangential to Me Too was I had an assistant casting director who worked with me on a bunch of shows. Her name is Dory Zuckerman. Her brother was one of the creators of Family Guy, and she's still around. I don't know how much casting she's doing anymore, but she knew everybody. And we were we were doing Frank's Place, and we were late at night on a sound stage sitting in director's chairs, about 5 or 6 of us, along a wall. And it got to be 1 or 2 in the morning. We had an actor who couldn't remember lines. We had to send out for cue cards, and we were stuck there, getting these final shots made with this forgetful actor. And I can Kilpatrick by name. He's dead. I guess we can mention him. And couldn't remember shit. As Clark would say, he had Chris. Can't remember shit. And Dory said, I said, you know what, I'm getting hungry. And Dory said, you're always hungry. We should chain a refrigerator to your ankle. A fat gag. And Dory, who was quite well endowed, I said back to her, you know what, Dory? I'd rather nurse. And this is as close as I could come to a Me Too violation. We all laughed. I called Dory and said, do you remember this? And she said, I do. It was funny as hell. And so that's, but I was not, I didn't harass women.
Well, great story, funny, but different times. Today, that might have been taken differently. The world has changed.
Well, she harassed me. Raquel Welch harassed me. She walked over, put her ass. I did not walk over to her and in any way assault her.
Well, unfortunately, she's not here, so we can't get her side of the story.
Yeah, I wish you were.
I wish you were as well. Delightful woman, I'm sure.
She was.
Red Fox you worked with in some capacity. Tell us about the time you had to get Red Fox on the set.
Red Fox?
Red Fox.
You know, I hate to say this, I don't remember the Red Fox story.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I'll refresh your memory a little bit.
Please, help me.
You went to his dressing room. He was with some people. He said something like, "Can a motherfucker relax?"
It sounds vaguely familiar. I've had a lot of moments. Listen, I worked on a lot of black shows. You know, I've had a lot of moments like this. Many. You know, black people, they're not white. They're much more colorful.
It's just another example of how selective memory is. Because I remember the story. You told it to me. In fact, interestingly, I was going to mention, I once saw Bob Einstein on a show and he told the same story. And I'll tell the story now since I opened the door. Someone, you, Bob Einstein, someone was working on a show with Red Fox. He had his call. He was late. The producer said, "Go get Red Fox. Come on, time is money." Knock on the door, no answer. Knock on the door again. Red Fox opens up the door. He's naked. There are 2 women on the bed, and there's a table with Coke on it. He turns and says, "Can a motherfucker relax?"
Yeah. This is an unusual tableau. And I use the word blow advisedly. See what I did there? This is why I got the mediocre money.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? Let's close out this section with a look at Frank's place, and we'll talk about that a bit. Yeah, no, this was '90s, I believe, mid '90s, early '90s, or late '80s.
Late 80s,
Late '80s, because
87, 88.
yeah, not long after that. This is a show that you produced and you wrote, and called Frank's Place, and there was some jazz in the show. Now, pardon me, as a precursor to talking about this experience working with networks and jazz and so forth, we'll go back a couple decades earlier. I guess it was like '77 or '78. Dubin had the idea of starting something called the Jazz Theater Workshop, which I co-founded with him. He was the artistic director. We went on to do an off Broadway show in '79 called Bebop, which was a theatricalized jam session. And this idea was that there's a connection between the improvisational art of jazz and the improvisational art of acting. Why not teach musicians so that they could do shows where they acted parts and also played music? And on the side, up to that point, really pretty much up to today, most of the stories on film, on television, and the theater about jazz musicians are bullshit. They really don't treat it honestly. They don't really focus on the joy of this music. So what you did, cut to a couple decades forward here, on Frank's Place, you had Tootie Heath, Dizzy Gillespie, I saw Harold Land doing some acting. Talk about the experience of getting that.
Walter Davis Jr., who was also in Bebop.
Walter Davis Jr., an incredible musician. Please talk to us about working with jazz musicians as actors and trying to put that on television.
Well, putting it on television, the biggest obstacle of putting it on television was getting past the studios and the networks, who had no appetite for jazz whatsoever. So it was a little shoving it down their throat, which I was happy to do. I mean, we have to do what you have to do, and I virtually every show I worked on where I had any juice at all, there was an episode that featured some jazz. Frank's Place featured a lot of jazz. This particular show was all about jazz, but one of the reasons we can't see Frank's Place now and it doesn't stream is because the music rights are in the way. There's so much music in that show. The jukebox is a character. It's really a Greek chorus for anybody who knows anything about theater. It's commenting on the action constantly in musical terms, and it's wall-to-wall music, everything from bebop to zydeco to the blues to gospel music. There's something happening on the jukebox, and the astute listener will see the relationship between what's going on musically and what's going on in the action of the story. Getting jazz players to act, well, you were there, you see it, you teach them to act, and they've already learned to do this very, very complicated and this complicated process of improvising, playing an instrument and improvising on it. So acting is a natural next step, and I think the musicians have a strong basis of roots that lends itself to acting, and I think people do. But musicians have already developed very strongly in that direction. We all improvise all the time. We could use some more skill, and that's what my current work is about. I'm about to launch a newsletter called Live Life Live that speaks to that, and offer some workshops in acting human. So I'm this improvisation in life, improvisation in music, this whole vibratory thing that connects us is vibrations and improvisation. That's what it all is. That's what it is.
That's what it is. We're going to jump over here to Jazz Video Guy. I'd like to start out this section of the proceedings with a video clip from 1964, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, when the band had Lee Morgan, John Gilmore, John Hicks, Victor Sproles, and Art Blakey, playing on BBC television, The Egyptian. Yeah, Art Blakey, the Jazz Messengers, probably one of the greatest universities in the history of jazz. I'm going to talk a little bit here about jazz video guy and my involvement with the music. I started listening to jazz when I was 8 or 9 years old when I saw Louis Armstrong on the Ed Sullivan Show. Really excited about that. Wanted to jump inside the TV and become part of that world. And my dad was a musician, although he hated the music business. Never encouraged me to practice. I probably would have been a musician today if I had practiced. But there was a music education in my music education program in my elementary school back in the late 50s, as there were in many schools in the United States. Started playing the trumpet in the fourth grade. Never really good, but enjoyed it. And through that, got more seriously into jazz. And I lived in Hartford, Connecticut, West Hartford to be exact, halfway between New York and Boston. And on Sunday nights, bands that had gone up to Boston for a gig would stop in Hartford and play a one-nighter. And by the time I was 14, I had seen Dave Brubeck, Maynard Ferguson, Stan Kenton, Rahsaan Roland Kirk, Sonny Rollins, Cannonball Adderley, just fantastic. And couldn't wait to move to New York and become part of that whole thing. Ended up in New York at NYU Film School, going to film school during the day, hanging out in jazz clubs, hanging out in the kitchen of the Vanguard. Got to meet a lot of the musicians that I idolized. Thanks to Dubin, Clark Terry opened a lot of doors for me. And I became a jazz journalist, actually. Walter Bishop Jr., the pianist with Clark Terry's big band and small group in the mid-'70s, who I met at a party that Dubin kind of organized. We became fast friends, and I did an interview with him. Got published in Downbeat magazine in 1977. That was my first published article, and that began a run as a jazz journalist. I got to interview, meet, get to know a lot of these people that I had idolized. Of course, I found out they were mere mortals. I thought they were gods. No, they weren't. They're just people, some good, some bad, and I focused on their music. I've had some incredibly funny stories with musicians you can find on the channel here with Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith wanted to castrate me and barbecue my dick and feed it back to me with sauce on it to eat it. This was over the telephone for some booklet notes that actually never got written. I once interviewed Sun Ra. John Gilmore, the tenor player in Sun Ra's band, was the tenor player on that clip with Art Blakey. And I asked in his Philadelphia row house where he lived with the band, I asked Sun Ra one question, and he talked nonstop for 6 hours. And that story is also detailed on the website. But my interest in technology in the 80s led me to word processing and eventually onto the internet. In 94, I got on the internet for the first time December 26, 1994, with the Mozilla browser. I had been using CompuServe, AOL. Soon as I got on the internet, I knew, although there was no audio and video at that time, but I knew this is going to be a unique way for people to get into jazz, bring the community together. I wrote an article about it. I ended up co-founding a website called Jazz Central Station. And in the 90s, worked for Jazz Central Station and with another site out of London, producing live webcasts. I had 99, I did that webcast from Birdland with Dave Liebman, Michael Brecker, and Joe Lovano that you'll find on my Jazz Video Guy page. The internet crashed. I moved to Tucson, Arizona, started doing websites for people, musicians who were my friends, like Sonny Rollins, who I interviewed first in '78. We became friends. Billy Taylor, who I met through Clark Terry, musicians like that. And then around 2004, the technology had changed. I hadn't actually made films in a number of years, but with the low cost of camcorders and editing on a computer and this new thing called streaming, I eventually started shooting videos with Sonny Rollins and Billy Taylor. 2006, I became the Jazz Video Guy. Since then, I've posted thousands of videos, millions of views, and I would say my 15 minutes of fame was pretty strong from 2006 until 2015, and things began to change around 2015. Of course, nothing ever stays the same. With YouTube, certainly a lot more people got on, a tremendous amount of content, and YouTube changed a lot. And something called algorithms became very important. YouTube, like many other websites, is set up to make money. How do you make money? You sell ads. How do you sell ads? You draw people onto the site. You keep them there. You push the advertising at them. That's how they make $1 billion a year. Well, later last year, YouTube changed their algorithm. Before YouTube changed the algorithm, I was getting like at least 10,000 views a day, sometimes 15,000 views a day between YouTube and Facebook. All of a sudden, they changed the algorithm. Boom. I lost 90% of my audience. Came as somewhat of a shock. I tried to work within those, figure out a way to fix that. I just haven't been able to figure it out. It's just not going to happen. And also, a number of things have changed. A lot of my work has been performance videos. Well, it turns out in the early days of YouTube and streaming video, people were more interested in watching that. Today, not so interested. And in fact, shorter videos have become a lot more popular. Certainly with the advent of TikTok and the decreased attention span of most viewers who are already multitasking their way through life. The sad truth is most people don't spend very long on a video, and they want within the first minute to get something, a laugh, information, something that keeps them watching. And I think very few web videos, except for maybe recipes and how to fix your toilet, people actually go all the way through. And I know that with my videos, no matter how long they are, what the subject, by the end of the videos, 20% of the audience is left. So I began to experience a lessening of viewers on YouTube, on the Jizz Video Guy channel. Concurrently, in my life, a lot of changes, a lot of upheaval. I had prostate cancer. I had open heart surgery. I met my soulmate. We decided to move to Mexico. I'm here now. It's fantastic. I love it. I have a fantastic relationship with Sherry, who's an artist. It's a beautiful place there. You might have seen my background in some of the pictures. And I'm also fascinated by Mexican culture, and I'm digging being an expat. So I started doing a video blog called The Syncopated Expat. Actually, it made its debut today. It's on YouTube, syncopatedexpat.com. I'll put the URL in the description here. And every week I have a chapter posting about something about being an expat, maybe something about the United States, because when you leave the United States, you have a somewhat different perspective about it. And when I came to Mexico, I didn't have that much experience with Mexican people. The ones that I knew and I worked with, I was found to be very wonderful people, very friendly, joyous people. Even more so here in Mexico. I would say that I'm fascinated by the culture. It's a beautiful place. It's like an old colonial town at Central Highlands. But the thing that really makes a difference here is the people. Even though I am an outsider, but I'm not your typical outsider, because my number one priority is to learn the language so we can communicate, because I'm interested in their stories. But outsiders and just about anybody else who comes here is greeted with an open heart. I don't want to generalize and say every Mexican loves every American. It's not quite like that. More complicated, but for the most part, Mexicans are very warm and welcoming, and it's nice to live in that environment. So I'm going to continue to do Jazz Video Guy, perhaps not as much as I used to, because I'm down here. I'm not really producing that much original content. I posted a lot of archival stuff lately. I've been meeting some very talented Mexican musicians down here, starting to post those things, and full steam ahead with Syncopated Expat, which allows me to really get more into filmmaking, which now is a little bit different. Excuse me. I'm incorporating artificial intelligence into the work. That makes it easier to do. I think the quality of the work is better. And I am a really lucky guy at 74 years old to live where I live and do what I do and be with the people that I are part of my life, like Sherry and the people in our community down here, and have friends like Richard Dubin and other people, and survived some serious health crises. And here I am. I'm going to keep on going. So that's a little bit of the Bret Primack story on the occasion of my 74th birthday. And I thought I would close it out here. Dubin and I are going to talk about kind of the current state of the entertainment business, the glut of content, what's happening with content creation these days, and some thoughts about where it might go in the future. So welcome back, Richard.
Hey.
The first question, the first thing I'd like to talk about here a bit is, I have a love-hate relationship with YouTube. I love it because it's fascinating to watch all the different content on there. But as a creator, it's very difficult to get noticed. And it's hard to get one's work out there. We're living in a time when there is more video, archival, and new things on Netflix and Amazon and other places. Richard, what are your thoughts on, and this is kind of advice for people because you are a veteran of an entertainment business, which is not quite like it used to be. You were involved pretty heavily in television, big time television. What are your thoughts now on if people want to create? Is filmmaking, is streaming video, is this medium a viable career?
It's a great question. One I've addressed repeatedly in recent weeks and months. As some may know, and I'm sure you do, there's a strike, a Writers Guild strike, and also a SAG-AFTRA strike. I'm a member of both of those unions. Suffice it to say, I taught at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University for 18 years, and I was sanguine about advising people there is a career to have in the entertainment business. It isn't this far. It's a job. You can get into the entertainment business and make a real living. I would not give that advice anymore. Not in the sense that there is the entertainment business as it was is over. I don't, it's gone. It's done. I recognize my brethren in these unions are out there striking. I think the skids are greased and everybody's going into the soup. It's over. That is the entertainment business as it has been over recent years. However, wherever there's upheaval, there's opportunity. So by viable career, if one means having courage, imagination, curiosity, the capacity to deal with the ups and downs of life and work, I think there's tremendous opportunity. What exactly it looks like, I don't know, but I would not depend upon anything like the traditional entertainment business. That's over. Is it over immediately today? No, but it's over. It's no more. No one, the kind of life I had in the entertainment business where it was real work with great dough, and that's gone. It's very few people can expect to have that anymore, and but there'll always be an appetite for entertainment. Of course, it's glutted. All the YouTube stuff, all the online stuff is there were no gates, and anybody can do it. And when anybody can do it, there's a lot of crap. But there's a lot of crap with the studios and networks. So I would be, if you cannot, Ruth Gordon said, when asked by aspiring actors about what they need to know about the acting business, she said, if you can think of anything else to do, do that. And so that would be my advice. If you can think of anything else to do, do that. If you really want to do something in terms of making entertainment, creating entertainment, entertaining people, have at it. Find a way. I wish I could tell you exactly how to do that. I can't. Learn more about story, learn your craft, whatever that is, and keep doing it. I know it's trite in some sense, but it's the as they say in entertainment lingo, which is Yiddish. That's the emes.
Yeah, yeah. About story, I want to talk about that for a minute, but let me get into that by saying something about the content on my Jazz Video Guide channel. I have a video that I did, an interview with Terry Gibbs, who just turned 99. He deserves to be an NEA jazz master. He's been around since the 40s. He's a fantastic musician, a hilarious guy, wonderful person. And at one point in his career, he worked with Jerry Lewis. Now, until recently, I guess maybe the past 20 or 30 years, when I was a kid, I grew up on Jerry Lewis movies. I love Jerry Lewis. Very, very funny. But and then of course I knew about him from the telethon. But Jerry Lewis was not a nice man. He was a very difficult man to work for, and he was rather challenging for Terry Gibbs. And in our interview, he talked about some of the challenges and the obstacles to working with Jerry Lewis. I posted that video maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and with all the videos I've done, over almost 2,500 videos, that is one of the most popular videos. And it comes in spurts. I guess somebody links to it. And when people watch that Jerry Lewis video, it becomes like a dumping ground for all their frustrations and bad feelings about show business and Jerry Lewis in particular. They're leaving, I met Jerry Lewis once. He was a prick. He talked down to my mother and he was a phony, and hundreds of stories about Jerry Lewis. This video shot to the top of the Jazz Video Guide charts. And last month, this video had 10 times the amount of views as other videos. I say this to form a question that says, because of a tabloid medium, because of our tabloid media and the way that our society is going, do you think people today are more interested in schlock than in story?
Well, I suppose so. I mean, they're interested in sensationalism. They want to see Kardashians fucking. That's how they got going. And who was that other, the Hilton woman? Paris Hilton. But people are interested in salacious crap. They watch a lot of crap. There are people, you don't need a lot of people. You know that you just need stalwart, a few thousand stalwart people who are willing to support your work to make a living. The thing is not to be seduced by the cultural norms, or you want to call them norms, the cultural propaganda of, I want to get rich and famous. As long as you want to get rich and famous, prepare to get fucked. If you want that, I'm sure it'll be available on some level to some number of people. But if you are willing, able, and actually want to do the work for the work's sake and figure out how to find your what is called nowadays tribe, your tribe. I don't know whether you have to. I don't know. The group of people who are in sync with what you want to do that, and don't be seduced by people who will come around to encourage you to do crap in order to make money and have visions of living in Malibu with mirror pools and all of that. If you're going to get sucked into that crap, you're in trouble. If you have a sincere desire to entertain, to do work that's worthwhile, and to make a living, not a killing. Killing comes with death. If you want to die making a killing, then have at it. It's not a road I recommend, even if it's called a viable career. It's not viable. Life is more important than work. So do your work in concert with your life, and do it with the idea of making a living well, supporting others, helping, bringing pleasure to others, bringing value to others. There's a life to be had in writing and directing and making things and performing and all of it. That's not going to go away. That's all in our human nature. And so while it's going to be tough for people who are used to what existed for a long time, it's going to be tough for them to make the transition. People who are flexible and who sincerely from the heart want to do something. I think this is a great time. It's turbulent, but the turbulence will accrue to the benefit of those coming aboard or those who want to change their lives to a healthier kind of life and entertainment.
Well, we are, excuse me, we are on the cusp of tremendous change on this planet in terms of people and technology. Certainly, artificial intelligence, which is just really people just know about for 6 or 7 months here, and it's already become a wonderful tool. I use it as an assistant for my writing, and I think I write better and faster because of it. And one of the issues I think that is present in the current strike situation in California is that it's very possible, probably likely, that actors may have a somewhat limited short life here as realistic avatars and people are produced by artificial intelligence so that the actors will no longer be needed. And perhaps maybe writers will no longer be needed. Maybe musicians will no longer be needed. Personally, I feel that they will. I think that our dedication to story, which goes back to the Greeks, will always remain. We're always going to be like around the cave, the fire in the cave, telling stories, perhaps different kinds of stories. And this debate about what is human and what is consciousness, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Artificial intelligence is consciousness. It's all part of consciousness. But how this plays out in terms of jobs and making films and creating things, we really can't predict at this point. I think what we need to do is have an open mind.
Well, you for sure need to have an open mind. Your reference to the music business is to the point. There used to be a music business. There is no longer a music business. The music business is over. When we talked about my early days hanging out in the studio with Div and everybody else, that scene no longer exists. It's over. Great musicians were unable to keep their houses. I mean, people who were, living in the studios. The same thing's going to happen with writers, directors, journeyman writers, journeyman directors, journeyman producers. It's over. It's over. There's no studio scene. There's three, four dates a day in studios. Bernie Glow had a big house in Great Neck. Bernie Glow, for those who don't know who he is, was a first lead trumpet player in the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. No more. It's over. It's not, and it's going to be over for actors and writers and directors. Will there be a few people who hang around? And I don't think they're going to hang around a lot. The people the acquaintances and people I know who are stars, people who household names and are in Marvel movies and stuff like that. It's over. Why? You need them?
Mr. Optimism here, folks.
I am optimistic. I'm just telling I'm totally optimistic. Huh?
What are you optimistic about?
Well, I think that people who really want to do it, have an opportunity if they can get past this whole idea of the dream. It's not a dream, it's a fucking dream. You wake up. Wake up. Dreaming's for while you're asleep. Wake up. Do things that you actually want to do for the purposes of connecting with other people in a wholesome way, of communicating, of not about looking for a mirror pool in Malibu. If you're looking for a mirror pool in Malibu, buy lube because you're going to need it.
Yeah, well, sadly, a lot of our culture is our narcissistic culture, as it's been with social media, is about how can I be famous and what's the least amount of work I can do to get there. And
I've had kids come into my office when I was teaching in Newhouse, and not a great many. I mean, this question was usually cloaked, but some people who straight up said, how do I get rich and famous? I said, well, you got to leave this office. That'll be a start because I have nothing for you.
Yeah.
Thanks for stopping by. This requires a change in people's attitudes. If people are doing this because this meaning playing music or making films or writing or whatever it is that they think of as creative work, everything can be creative work if you approach it with a creative mindset. But if you want to do these things in tradition you call creative, do it with a full heart and for the right reasons, and you will make a living. If you want to be rich and famous, I think it's a stupid aspiration. It's more ambition. Try aspiration, skip ambition, and make a living. And I think that'll be absolutely possible. It requires clear intention to do the right thing and to connect with people for the right reasons.
Good words.
That's what I'm optimistic about.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that, and thanks for spending some time with me on my birthday. I greatly appreciate it.
It's great. It's great to be with you on your birthday. I wish, and we maybe on another occasion can talk about some of the times we've spent together that really amusing. I'm thinking of Concord Hotel. I'm thinking of walking down Madison Avenue while they were shooting Network. I'm thinking of all these things involve. I noticed you said this was going to be RX rated, which I took to mean RX like in prescription. So we can talk more about eating hallucinogens and having fun.
Definitely, we'll talk about that. And I'm going to close out here with a story. I mentioned at the beginning of the show I'd like to share an R-rated story. So I was, as we talked about at the beginning of this, a taxi driver in the late 60s, early 70s in New York City. My first summer as a cab driver in the summer of 69, it was really hot. I was going to film school. I was serious about filmmaking, but somewhat socially backward. I was a 19-year-old version, to be specific. And one night, while driving my cab, I found myself on 42nd Street between 9th and 10th Avenues. There was an exit from the Lincoln Tunnel there and a street called Dyer Avenue. And on Dyer Avenue, there was an old burlesque house called the 42nd Street Playhouse. At that time, there were strippers appearing at the 42nd Street Playhouse, not like the strippers of today with lap dances and that social scene. These were women who had acts and costumes and really put on a show. And perhaps not as lewd as some might describe today's strippers, but nevertheless, a certain erotic nature to what they did. And so I'm at the corner there at a light in front of the 42nd Street Playhouse, and there's a giant cardboard cutout appearing now, Destiny, a very voluptuous platinum blonde. Okay, interesting. Suddenly, Destiny comes out of the theater and into my cab. I'm a little speechless. She tells me she's going to 49th Street between 1st and 2nd. Okay, we drive across 42nd Street. Very, very hot. This was the days before air conditioning in cabs. The engine, of course, is very, very hot. And I'm looking at her and she's looking at me and she says, "You're cute." Wow. Not that many women had said that to me at that point. My heart started to beat a little faster. She said, "What do you think I have on underneath this fur coat? Show me." She opened up her fur coat and her naked body appeared, which of course totally blew my mind. I'm driving across 42nd Street. There's a naked woman in the back of my cab. My heart begins pounding. My pants get very tight. We have a kind of a nice conversation, a brief one. We get to right in front of her apartment building on 49th Street, a very busy street. No parking spaces, just a large space in front of her building. And she says to me, "How would you like to come upstairs and try out my waterbed?" Now, in 1969, it was reputed that sex on a waterbed was a cosmic experience. For me, sex on a towel would have been a cosmic experience. But nevertheless, I had a decision to make. Do I want to park my cab here and go upstairs? I might get towed. Or do I just want to forget about it? I thought about it. 3 months later, I was at her front door with her. She opens the door. Studio apartment. Did not have on the AC all the time. Very, very hot in there. First thing that happens, we get into the apartment. She takes off her clothes. And although I was somewhat inexperienced in these matters, noticed a very pungent aroma emanating from her vagina. She noticed that I noticed, and she said to me, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I did 6 shows today with my snake." Okay. Just as she said that, I happened to look out the window. I saw a tow truck pull up. I knew I had to get down there as quickly as possible. Once they put the hook on your car, it's over. I said my goodbyes. I went downstairs. I got there just in time. The guy said I was lucky. 30 seconds later, big fine. Just as I was going to get in my cab, I looked up. I saw her in the window of her apartment. She had a nightie on. I shook my head and I said to myself, that was my rendezvous with destiny. Thanks for joining me today on this special edition of Will the Real Bret Primack Stand Up? Thanks for your support of my work as a jazz video guy. Please check out Syncopated Expat. Please stay healthy and please stay positive, because I believe that the best